This presentation is delivered by the Stanford Center for Professional Development.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. Can you hear me okay in the back? Yes? Now, first of all, I want to know, how many people are from Hawaii here in this room? How many people have been to Hawaii? How many would like to go to Hawaii? Okay, this room has good judgment. I know that. It's great to be here. I have very fond memories of my days at Stanford. The biggest memory in my head was when I was doing my surgical residency at Stanford Medical Center. I was a chief resident at Stanford. I was so poor that I bought a Cadillac for about $600. And it was a great car except for the fact that it didn't have a reverse gear. So I could only drive forward but not backwards. So it took a lot of extra time to look for parking stalls where I could drive forward at the end of my shift. And the headlights didn't work. So when I'm driving on the freeway, I have to turn on the emergency blinker so I could see the road every other second, basically. But I have really fond memories. It's great to be back here. And I'm looking forward to telling a little bit about what we do at Skai Ventures. This is my office. Please come and visit anytime. Skai is a word that we invented, we created. Kai is the Hawaiian word for water, ocean. Of course, sky is the blue sky. So where the ocean joins the sky is the horizon, right, which holds infinite breadth and possibilities. Hence the name Skai Ventures. And our business model is very simple. Right? We look for the smartest people, the most ingenious ideas we can find on a global scale, and we transform them into businesses that are profitable, high growth, that can do something good for the world that we live in. And as you can see from our model, invent, disrupt, and inspire. And the word disrupt is in there because we like to focus on the kind of business that are really game changers, because it takes just as much time and energy and work to build something that's really a game changer than something that's incremental. Hence, we like to focus on disruptive. What is interesting, however, is we do all of this in a part of the world that is the most isolated landmass on Earth. This is a Google Earth shot of Hawaii. So for those of you who've been there before, did anybody go to Hawaii not on an airplane? So we are in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. So we are about 2,400 miles from California and almost 4,000 miles from Japan. Highly isolated. But the point of today's sort of sharing with you what we do is the fact that entrepreneurship can take place anywhere by anyone in any subject matter. All right? It matters not where you're located. Silicon Valley, Stanford is a great, fantastic location. It is the mecca in the minds of many. But it's not a requisite. It is not a requisite for innovation. It is not a requisite for creating great enterprises. So I would like to invite all of you, when you have a chance, to come and visit us in Hawaii and come and visit us at Skai Ventures. We'd love to sort of get to know you and share with you what we do. So just a plug for Hawaii while we're here, right? It has the highest percentage of millionaires in the United States. You will find every celebrity entrepreneur in Hawaii shopping at the same Whole Foods and Safeway. All right? Oprah lives there. Dell lives there. Schwab lives there. Pierre Midier is there. Steve Case is there. Everyone is there. We have the longest life expectancy in the United States. And we have, in fact, Honolulu was voted one of the 10 healthiest cities in the entire world. Very ethnically diverse. For those of you from Hawaii, you know that. And we also have our own time zone, Hawaiian Standard Time. So when I was growing up, Hawaiian Standard Time used to mean 30 minutes late, basically. But this is also very interesting. The attractive lifestyle also makes us one of the largest importers of entrepreneurs in the entire world. I would say outside of Silicon Valley, we probably have the highest concentration of entrepreneurs who are between successes and who are between failures of anywhere else in the world. And it's the perfect place to incubate, to start, and to nurture the next really big idea. Besides, we're the most isolated landmass in the world, so no one really is going to steal your idea until it's been nurtured along far enough. And we take a lot of young people every summer. So last summer we had 15 interns, and we had kids from everywhere, including Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, all around the United States and the world. In fact, I got a call in March of last year from the fellow who had did a summer internship with us the year before. He said, "Hey, Dr. Wu," he said, "I'm going to quit Columbia and start my own company." And I said, "Chris, that's great. Have you told your dad?" And so he finished Columbia, and he's now working in a company, with us. So, like many other companies here in Silicon Valley, our basic guidelines are not so different, right? Go after big business, at least $1 billion in market size. Strong IP, good management team, and everything we do, we hope at the end of the day will benefit the world and the community that we live in. We also pay a lot of attention to Asia and to China in all that we do as a very important market that we go after. Who's from China here? Okay, thank you. So we have a number of portfolio companies, 6 of which are really sort of very much in the midst of being grown and looking at exits. So I will share with you briefly some of these companies. And by the way, so Hawaiian style, Hawaiian time, all right? Very casual. If you have a question, raise your hand. I'll be happy to entertain them at any time. So we really have sort of 2 categories of businesses. One is in the area of novel materials. Right? These are materials that I think are great platforms that can grow in many different ways with multiple market applications. And so the top 3, TrueTag, CBI Polymers, and Hygienics. TrueTag is an edible barcode that is extraordinarily information-rich, very inexpensive, that can be eaten and can tag everything that goes into your body, basically. So think about the implications of that. CBI Polymers is a green tech for environmental remediation, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, and it had a very large role in Fukushima in the last couple of years. And Hygienics is working on the most advanced technology for an artificial cornea to treat blindness, to restore vision for the 10 million people in the world who are blind today. So think about these technologies, right? These could very well be prototypic companies right here in Silicon Valley, except we're doing this in Hawaii. We also have healthcare services platforms, including these 3 companies. Our Skai Vision Institute is focused on vision surgery, everything you can imagine, refractive, cataract, oculoplastic, glaucoma, retina surgery, as well as cornea transplantation. We have an Endoscopy Institute that has a capacity to do about 15,000 surgeries a year for the early detection of cancer. And we're also looking to build the largest cornea transplantation center in China today. And finally, we're putting the next vision of Skai together, which will be a fund that's going to be dedicated to software and healthcare IT, which I'll tell you a little bit about. So TrueTags. TrueTags is an edible barcode. And as you find, the common denominator for all these companies are threefold. 1, a really big problem that needs to be solved. 2, a very unique solution. And 3, a great team. So why are we in this business? Well, counterfeit is a big business. In fact, it is conceivably the largest business in the world, right? The margins are huge. Everybody's in it. It touches every product, every region, everywhere. And so in essence, what we have created is another form of identification, like a fingerprint, like a retina scan, except in this case, we can do it in very large volume and create massive amount of information on a customized basis. So a picture is worth 1,000 words. So a quick kind of a news clip on this particular.
Up next, cracking down on counterfeit drugs. How an edible security tool is being used to take on the illegal industry.
Can someone tune that down a little bit?
We see barcodes these days on just about everything we buy. There's a local company that makes those codes edible, not so much as a tasty treat, but to make food and drugs safer. Manolo Morales reports.
The pharmaceutical market has an estimated value of $800 billion worldwide. About 10% of the market is considered counterfeit.
So this is an $80 billion counterfeit market. I mean, counterfeit incorporated, so to speak, much bigger than any corporation we know of that's legitimate.
Preventive measures are taken with more secure packaging. but a Hawaii company called TrueTag Technologies wants to add an extra dose of security by putting what's essentially edible barcodes on every pill.
And we sprinkle a few of these, think of like a sugar donut on a tablet, so that an inspector can take a TrueTag reader and read those little grains of sugar, so to speak, the TrueTags, and tell it has a unique optical signature.
Each coded tag is smaller than a grain of sugar. It's made of silica, found in many food items, and FDA approved. Each one carries a unique spectrum of colors that is detected by a reader, which looks like a microscope. TrueTag developed the reader, which will also be provided to the pharmaceutical companies and eventually to the pharmacists.
As long as they have a line of sight, they can read our tags and validate with their security teams, their QA teams who are around the world, making sure the supply chain is safe.
TrueTag Technologies recently won the grand prize at the
So I think that gives you a sort of an idea. We started with a silicon wafer, much like what we do here in Silicon Valley for semiconductor manufacturing. And we can convert them into basically silica. In the process, we can embed billions of combinations of spectral codes into the material. But the beauty is this, right? Silica is already approved as an excipient in drugs. It's been used in many, many types of pharmaceuticals. Hence, there is no regulatory risk associated with the development of this particular product. And so again, as you saw earlier, it gave you a sense of scale, right? Grain of salt, grain of sugar, and a grain of TrueTags. So in this particular case, we can insert over 1 billion combinations of spectral code, and we can read it. The simple reflection from a light source can be picked up and deciphered as the basis for tracking, tagging, anti-counterfeiting, and identification. So a light shine on a tablet can be read by an iPad-enabled reader. In this case, we can tell you this is Lipitor, 20 milligrams, LACO expiration date, manufacturer site, and so on and so forth. And this is a very powerful technology. Size of the market is quite large. There's 1.5 trillion tablets made every year in the world today, of which 1/3 are branded or high-value products. So that's the target for the counterfeiters. And so that basically makes up the $80 billion counterfeit drug market. But unlike a Prada shoes or a Gucci bag, right, when you take a counterfeit medicine, it could have catastrophic consequences to the end user. So this is not just about economics, but it's also about something that's extremely important, right, for society at large. We can do these things for roughly 1 cent a pill or less. So that's roughly a $5 billion sort of opportunity for us just in the pharmaceutical side of the equation. So for every 2% of the market that we're able to penetrate is worth about $100 million in revenue, basically. So it's a powerful technology. It's an interesting sector, but we're not limited, of course, to pharmaceuticals. You think about all the different things that we ingest or things that we don't ingest, whether it's Chinese milk powder, whether it is computer chips, wine. The folks from Chateau Lafite had come and talked to us and say, hey, this is really interesting. Would it be possible to put this in a very high-end, branded wine and spirits? We said, sure, of course it's possible. However, could you send us 6 cases of Chateau Lafite so we can do proper R&D on the equation? So every one of our portfolio companies has an executive team that's seasoned and understands the domain extremely well. So Ken Mansfield is the president. He was the COO of a company that he helped started called Authentics. Started with 5 employees, just a startup company, grew to a point where it eventually was sold to the Carlyle Group. Peter Wong is our chief operating officer, spent many years in Silicon Valley, very transaction-oriented attorney, was involved in the IPO of Leapfrog and Quaker Sports. And so great management team that understands the security business, that understands transactions. So that's TrueTags. Any quick questions before I move on? IGenX. IGenX is another one of our material science companies. In this particular case, we're focusing on developing a solution to solve the problem of corneal blindness. This company came to be when I was on an airplane flying back to Hawaii from California, and I sat next to an ophthalmologist who kind of shared with me sort of the problem of the world not having enough donors for cornea or organs at large. And so it turns out it's a huge problem, particularly in Asia. because of a number of cultural and religious reasons, Asians by and large are very reluctant to donate organs. So on the left, what you see is a picture of a blind cornea. On the right, it's the same cornea after transplant. So it turns out that more corneas are transplanted in the world today than heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas combined. It is the #1 human transplant procedure in the world. 10 million people in the world today could benefit from a cornea transplantation. The entire world's donor base is only about 100,000, which means 99% of the people who are blind in the world today will basically never have a chance to see for as long as they live. And that's the reason we embarked upon this project. So there, even with the 1% of the population that could conceivably access a human donor cornea, there are many drawbacks. The rejection rate is roughly 20%, so 1 of every 5 corneal transplant rejects because there's no matching that takes place. There's no ABO blood typing or matching. There's, of course, the risk of disease transmission with a human donated organ, and they have to be on lifelong topical immunosuppressive medication. So there clearly are limitations. So we have developed material from recombinant human collagen that has this very unique property to allow epithelialization and nerve growth to take place within the organ. We have now seen a very long-term follow-up in a group of patients that have been transplanted. And we have just finished the completion of a manufacturing facility that can supply basically the entire North American market right in Honolulu. And this material, interestingly enough, can be laser sculpted to give it the right refractive power, which makes it extraordinarily interesting and powerful, because conceivably this technology could be used not only to treat the 10 million people with corneal blindness, but to be used for refractive correction, things such as presbyopia as well, which impacts basically everyone over the age of 55. So our advantages are multifold: unlimited supply. We'll no longer be restricted by the 1% sort of lottery for someone who wants to regain their vision. Off-the-shelf convenience. If you're a surgeon, you want to schedule a case for 3 o'clock Tuesday next week, you can go ahead and schedule that surgery. You don't have to wait for someone to pass away, will and donate their cornea, for someone to be able to pick that up, process it, harvest it, and transport it to a recipient. And the fact that it allows nerve and epithelial growth is extremely important from a clinical standpoint, and no lifelong need for immunosuppressives. We have an opportunity to capture really a $2 billion market opportunity, but equally important, we have a chance to do something that fundamentally is extremely important from a humanitarian standpoint for the 10 million people around the world who are blind and who basically would never really have a chance without technology such as this. Doug Post, who was the COO at Vizix, which was acquired by AMO for $1.3 billion, and then which sold to Abbott, 1.2, is our vice chairman. And Tony Lee from Silicon Valley, who's done 3 venture-backed medical device companies, all successfully exited, is our chief operating officer. So again, the same thing, right? Big markets, strong IP, great management team. Except it's done all in Hawaii. We also have a number of healthcare services companies. I'll go through these very quickly. We run a surgery center that has the capacity to do 15,000 surgeries a year with 13 surgeons. This is really sort of a very synergistic play with our core eye business. When you come to Hawaii, please come over. If you need to have eye surgery, it will be on the house. Just give me a call. This is the lobby of our center, and it's beautifully constructed. And this is part of a franchise that we hope to sort of expand throughout Asia and China as well. And of course, as I mentioned before, we do all types of eye surgery. And we also have an endoscopy center where we do colonoscopy, endoscopies for early detection of cancer. Similarly, if you ever want to have a colonoscopy, please give us a call. CBI Polymers, this is the last company I'll share with you before we go to a Q&A. So in the course of developing our artificial cornea, we had to assemble a team that's really world-class in material science. And then we saw an RFP from the US government asking someone to develop material that could bind radioactive particles. So we had this group of really great scientists sitting around the room and say, hey, could we try this? Of course, that wasn't the area of our commercial expertise, but we certainly knew about materials and we knew about binding at a very deep level. So we competed for that prize. We won. We got a bunch of funding from the US government and then eventually developed a product in an arena that's for surface decontamination of radioactive and hazardous chemical materials. And so it turns out that this is an industry that's not the most advanced with respect to innovation. The disposal of hazardous waste has never been really a sexy area of pursuit for technologists. And but the cost of waste disposal, as you can imagine, right, is really tied to both the volume of and the weight of waste that you generate, basically. So the economics are huge in this area. So we have developed a material that's got this exquisite ability to bind surface contaminants. And again, pictures are worth 1,000 words. So this is a regular asphalt surface somebody's driving. You can see the oil and the grease and the grime on that surface. You apply this blue gel, you wait for it to dry, and when you remove it, I think you can appreciate that on this slide. You can see the area in the back has already been power washed 3 times. Everything has been picked up and contained in that particular gel. This is mold and mildew on a concrete sidewalk. You can see the before, the during, and the after. This is a bilge tank, petroleum, before and after. And so imagine the amount of labor and cost savings involved in the deployment of this particular technology. So let's say if you're going to clean 100,000 square feet of radiological waste using traditional technology, which is really soap and water, radiac wash, detergents, you probably generate around 140,000 pounds of waste. And the cost of disposing that based on weight and volume will cost you about $350 million. Using this technology, because the material at the end of the day is very compressible, it's very lightweight, you don't require the use of water, we can do the same job and generate only about 13,000 pounds of waste. So the cost of disposal for that is roughly only $33 million. So you're saving, in this particular case, right, $317 million by the deployment of this particular technology. So we have customers all around the world in all sectors of industry at this point. And then, of course, as all of you know, right, Fukushima happened about 2 years ago, March 11th. And and this is going to be a very long, very costly, cleanup. And in many ways, right, Japan is like a brother to us by virtue of the fact that we're in Hawaii. So we did a lot of work to volunteer our time and efforts to help with the remediation and the cleanup in Japan. And so here was a clip that was I want to show you from CNN.
So what if I told you that you could peel away toxic waste and radiation? Just peel it away with just a little bit of spray? Yes, it could be true and happening right now. It's our Big Eye, and it's next. Welcome back. Devastating just doesn't seem like a strong enough word for what the people of Joplin, Missouri are dealing with right now. The city manager says the tornado split the town in half. A storm chaser in the area says parts of the city are just unrecognizable. Now take a moment and imagine the massive cleanup for this area and all that debris that you're looking at. Beyond carting everything off in trucks, there is always a danger of chemical exposure in a cleanup effort of this magnitude. And think about Japan and their cleanup efforts from the tsunami. They not only have to worry about cleaning up debris, but also radiation. One of the products being used to clean up radiation in Japan is actually called Decon Gel. The manufacturers are based in Hawaii, and Decon Gel has the consistency of hair gel, if you will. And here to tell us much more about this is Eileen Zimmerman. She spoke to the inventor of this miracle goo. Eileen, thanks for coming on the show. First of all, tell us a little bit about how this works.
Decon Gel is a gel that goes on as a gel over radioactive waste, hazardous waste. It can clean up a meth lab, anything that's tiny microscopic particles. And it hardens, and then it can just be rolled up and thrown away. So it encapsulates whatever's hazardous so that it doesn't leak or leach out. So it's really safe, and it lowers the hazardous level of the waste. And then it's just tossed out.
And so you just spray it on or brush it on?
It's brushed on, and it can be brushed on almost any material, whether it's concrete or it's like a lab bench. wood. It just goes on like a gel. It's spread really thin, it dries, and then it can be rolled up, folded, and compressed and thrown out.
And what sort of hazardous waste are we talking about that this gel can actually clean up?
Well, in Japan, it's helping to clean up radioactive waste, but it can also be used for any kinds of hazardous waste, like the Department of Energy has used it in their labs to clean up beryllium, and it can also be used anything that's toxic. It was used to help clean up. There was a problem in Western Hungary with a village that had an alkali sludge problem, and they had to clean up alkali with it, which can burn your skin on contact. So that went down, and it cleaned it up. Anything like that, anything that's dangerous, touch or be around.
And from what I understand, this was actually discovered by accident. How did that happen?
Well, the CEO of the company is Hank Wu, who's in.
Really discovered by accidents. But just like the name Yahoo really wasn't, it doesn't, really not the true acronym. But again, you get the idea. This is one of our team members making a donation to the Japan Hyper Rescue Team, helping to clean up. This is our chief scientist in Fukushima. And so this is an automobile that was driven in and out of Fukushima. If you're in Japan, if you see a car with a Fukushima license plate on it, don't go near it, right? Because likely there's still residual radiation on it. And the radiation's been tracked. In this particular case, where you apply the gel, you strip it off, you take away all the radiation, and you can do the same thing with tires and so on and so forth. So people are spraying entire automobiles and buildings and so on and so forth. So this is a kindergarten outside of Fukushima with the kids. Since the event on March 11th, for 6 months, they couldn't go outside to play at all because everything surrounding the building was radioactive. So we actually assisted the Japan government, and we did a complete decontamination of the entire school so the kids could go outside and play. And that was part of the basis for sort of the CNN coverage of this particular event and technology, thanks to one of the best publicists in the world, Paula Page. And so as a commercial opportunity, 31 countries have nuclear power plants in this world. And there are 439 nuclear reactors. Every 18 months, every one of these reactors needs to be maintained and shut down and restarted and cleaned, basically. So very interesting sort of long-term opportunity. Based on the technology, we've also launched a secondary brand called Prestore for environmental building restoration. This is a law enforcement officer's monument in Washington, D.C. You can see the before, the during, and the after. Because the idea is we can actually remove debris and dirt from really fine surfaces without any damage or injury to that surface. This is St. Vincent's in New York, very beautiful European-style church. And they have many years of soot, carbon deposit on the walls. But certainly they don't want to sort of power wash the inside of the church. You can see the before and the after on that Rumford tile, on the limestone. And in fact, this is an entire wall in front of where the candles are being burned. You can see sort of the difference there, basically. CBI polymers. So our next thing is we're going to actually put another fund together that's going to focus more on the software and the healthcare IT side of the equation as well. We realize there are lots of these accelerators that are springing up everywhere in the country. There are many of them in many parts of the world, and there are several that are very well known here: Techstars, Y Combinator, and so on and so forth. So how many of you have entered one of those competitions? How many of you plan to? If you enter one of these competitions, if you win, come and see us in Hawaii. We would love to work with you, back you, support you, and help you. Because that's the business that we're in, is working with really smart people with great ideas, developing technologies that can have a really fundamental impact in the world. And guess what? You can do it in a part of the world, right? There's very little traffic. It's got great weather. You can body surf, boogie board, right? You can go on Hawaiian time, and you can live longer than anybody else. To help me with this venture involves a couple guys. Dennis Coleman, who was introduced to me by Tom. Dennis was the founder of Symantec, fourth largest software company in the world, inventor of spell check. And Bill Malone, who just retired from Cisco as their CTO, he's from Hawaii. He grew up there. He just moved back there. So we're going to forge a fund to really look at young entrepreneurs in this area. So that's it. That's the lineup at Skai Ventures. And So if you have a chance, I would really urge you to come to Hawaii, come and visit us. We'll be very happy to talk to you about any ideas and innovations you might have that will really have a fundamental disruptive impact on the world that we live in. And so I hope to see one or several of you in our photo lineup for next year. Thank you very much. And I'm open for questions now, please. Just raise your hand if you have a question. And
I have two questions. One on the cornea transplant. Does insurance, on the numbers of the potential market, does insurance play a role on that, in that at all, in those numbers? Like, for example, like, let's say there's 10 million people that need a cornea transplant, and like, do you say X amount of those people would need insurance to cover the procedure, and will insurance cover that procedure?
Yeah, very good question. So our market numbers, the 2 billion is only the addressable market in the parts of the world where people have the ability to afford to pay for cornea, whether through self-pay or through insurance. But as a corporate policy, we have also established a non-profit charity with a specific purpose of donating cornea in those regions of the world where people would not have the ability to pay either through themselves or through insurance.
How do you make sure your entrepreneurs don't just go surfing all the time?
We can't, but they're self-driven, right? It's if they go surfing all the time and that's all they did, ultimately they're not going to be successful, right? So if they're not going to be successful, they're not going to last very long. So there's a process of self-elimination, and it's interesting. So I'm a swimmer, so I swim almost daily in the ocean before the sharks come, and it's great. It's sort of like my my problem-solving time, in that water for 40 minutes. So Hawaii offers a really interesting environment, but I think people there work just as hard, they're just as driven, just as committed, except you have a lifestyle that's sort of really, unmatched, basically. Because someone was going to slack off, they can do it in Palo Alto as well as Hawaii, basically. So.
What key personal characteristics do you find make the best leaders or the best successful entrepreneurs?
That's a very good question. One is an enormous amount of optimism in general. The second is a very high level of tolerance for pain. Because, right, startups are difficult, right? You're met with challenges. Unlike walking into an established company where things are kind of laid out, here you have to sort of figure out the map and find the car and find the gas and drive the car yourself. I mean, it's all about creating something for nothing. So you have to really love it, to thrive at it.
Just some more specific questions about TrueTag and the scalability of the product. I was wondering about your CapEx, and that when you were talking about scalability, is it already at a state where you have a minimum order quantity that will actually apply to the profitability of the actual tag itself in manufacturing?
Yeah, very good. What do you do, by the way?
I do business development.
For?
I'm in a consulting firm.
Okay, all right, I'm just curious. Yeah. So, it's a very good question. And so we have the capacity. So you're right, it's a catch-22 basically. So we have a large portfolio of prospective clients, globally basically. But we've also sort of figured out enough of the nitty-gritties of this technology. We understand efficient and scale. So when it comes to pharmaceuticals, yeah, no question. We can do massive volumes at 1 cent a pill and make it a very predictable business from a CapEx and a profit standpoint. Sure, it depends.
Failure rate in the supply chain for the silicas, do you know, is there a percentage failure rate when you're going through manufacturing?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great product.
Dr., do you mind describing the moment where you kind of walked out of med school and made the decision to go more the innovation path as opposed to the standard medical practice? What was it that caused one direction versus the other?
It was when my Cadillac caught on fire. And so I actually didn't walk from medical school into business. I came to Stanford to do my training as a surgeon. And so I got into Stanford. I was resident. I was chief resident. But being a surgeon and being at Stanford, it was just a great place because everyone was entrepreneurial, and sort of the concept of being creative and problem solving was all around you. So I was very much bitten by the bug. So the idea was really to look for problems to solve in the operating room because there were many. And eventually we got into the business of creating, inventing, devices and solutions that could solve these problems. And we discovered, sure enough, there are people who would invest and pay large sums of reward for coming up with a great solution. And that's how that transformation eventually took place. And when the Cadillac caught on fire, it really crystallized everything else. So.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on the question that he asked. When you say like high tolerance of pain, like could you give an example or like could you be more specific of what you mean by that? Like, in that context.
Do you play sports?
I used to play sports.
Yeah, what did you play?
Soccer.
Soccer. And what was training like when you were playing soccer? Were there days when you're pushed so hard that you just think, oh my gosh, I cannot go another 5 minutes?
You say it's like more of a mental game then? It's like
more of what?
A mental game?
A mental game? Oh, absolutely. Well, absolutely. It's very much a mental game, sure. Right? It requires a certain amount of mental toughness, I think, right? I mean, it's not for everyone. Not everyone's different, right? It's about casting life, right? If you're really tall and thin, you shouldn't be a wrestler. You should be a volleyball or basketball player. Entrepreneurship is the same thing. Some people thrive in conditions where there's uncertainty and there's challenges and imperfection. Other people really hate that. So it really selects for different sort of people. No right or wrong, no good or bad. Just everybody's different, basically. And
So I'm just thinking about the application of the products that you want to get into as many fields as possible, and it's just kind of spread out the word of the product. But at the same time, you're definitely going to run into a lot of problems with safety issues and some other issues. Only by actually trying things out where you actually know if something can be worked somewhere. And yet, as an entrepreneur, when things are all going well, it's perfect. But even as when you have a great product, when it's actually maybe having one or two very serious safety issues in some other areas, especially a lot of them are kind of in the medical field, and how do you balance that? How do you know that a risk is something that you want to actually take?
It's a rare moment when things all go well as an entrepreneur. But it's no more dangerous than walking across the street on a Friday night in Palo Alto, either, basically. So, it's just a constant sort of assessment of your risk and your return. And of course, you want to be thoughtful, you want to be strategic, you want to understand your risk so you can deal with it, proactively, basically. But entrepreneurship is a risky game, basically. And that's just the nature of the beast, I think. Sure.
This is a product question, Dr. Wu. On the polymers product, when you clean the radiation off the car, the vehicle, is there a method that you can tell the percentage that it's fully cleaned?
Sure. Geiger counter, right? So with a Geiger counter, you're going to be able to know how much radiation there is before, how much there is after, how much you capture. It's actually fairly standard, easy. It's easy to do, basically, yeah. Whoa, I see 5 hands go at the same time.
Same exact question. What do you do with the waste once you're...
It depends very much on what it is that you're removing, right? So if it's radioactive material, there are very strict statutes that you have to follow, right? So what you're doing is really, you're capturing and transporting that to a safe place, basically. But if it's dirt off your backyard, right, the material is incinerable, super compressible, water soluble, biodegradable. So you can actually literally throw in the trash, basically.
So to follow up with another product question on the TrueTags, I think you had said that there's some crazy amount of combinations that you can make, and it works based on reflection. So I was wondering if if the reflection has to do with some sort of different patterning you're doing on the surface of that silicon dioxide, or whether you are molecularly changing the composition.
It's actually nanopores. So we're actually creating nanopore structures within a silica, basically. Yeah. Back.
Can you talk a bit about Skai Venture's business model and its relationship to the entrepreneurs? I'm getting the sense it's something in between sort of like an incubator or a pure VC. We're just trying to understand that.
So it's not a pure VC in the sense that we don't just deploy capital, but we're quite hands-on. So typically we will work with an entrepreneur in a very early stage, but we'll actually really sort of roll up our sleeves because we're operators. We understand sort of the pains of what it is to do a startup company. So we'll not only deploy capital, but human resources and time and energy. So it is a hybrid. It is very much a hybrid between traditional venture capital and a technology accelerator. Yeah, good question.
How did you mentioned with the cornea product, you've got the arm that does that for those who can't afford it, kind of, and so it's kind of a corporate social responsibility thing. How do you determine how much to put into that versus, actually being a venture capital firm? Where do you draw those? How do you draw those lines? Is that you making that call? Is that, any thoughts on that balance between the social responsibility in that sense and the profit-making aspects?
Sure, no, that's a really good question. That's probably a fairly long discussion that we can share after the session also. But Skai Ventures really, as the parent company, we allowed our portfolio companies to make their own decisions, about business models. But it has to make sense because the business has to be successful, right? You can't, in order for the philanthropy to be successful, right? So the cart and the horse has to be in the sort of right order, basically. But there's a happy medium somewhere where you can truly do something good for the world. But you can also build an enterprise that's got a great brand, that's profitable, and it's got a lot of growth ahead of it. So like anything else, right? It's judgment, right? It's judgment.
So also about the cornea transplant, like how did you expand the market in China and like kind of adapt to the healthcare system?
Wait, I'm sorry, say again, how do I what?
Like expand like the market in China and Asia.
Are you from China?
Yes.
Yeah, which part of China are you from?
Oh, I'm from Shandong.
Where?
Shandong province.
Okay, I was just there.
Oh, cool.
Qingdao.
Yeah, it's not like the healthcare system is very different.
It's very different, but it's changing. It's evolving. I was in Shandong just last year. I went to Qingdao, and they have the largest cornea transplantation hospitals in all of China. And but their volume is not very large because there's a lack of donors, basically. So I think China it's a powerful economy. It's developing very quickly, and things are evolving. And I think, but it's a very different system. So our basic approach in China is to work with very strong Chinese partners, right? That can understand best ways to sort of enter that market and work that market. What we provide is a very fundamental technology, right? A source of supply that is extremely rare and valuable. But we cannot go and learn the system in every country from scratch, right? So for China, for Japan, for Korea, for Europe for that matter, right? We're all working with local partners, basically. So that's our fundamental approach. Okay, one more.
I have a question about what kind of technology-based products that you're actually willing to try and see, like how long do you, for example, if something that's going to really change the entire field, but it's going to take maybe 50 years to find out, are you actually willing to get into the field, or are you more interested in something, getting involved with something that is going to have quick results?
It depends. Depends if the surf is up or not. Something that's going to take 15 years is best at a university. Well, that's the function of a university, of an academic research institution, right? Is basic fundamental knowledge, basically, right? We would love to be in a position where any of you have an idea, right? That we can prove if there's validity or concept in a commercial marketplace. Because there are tests you can do, right? We're not in the business of creating fundamental technology from scratch, because that's unpredictable. It could take you a year, it could take you 100 years. And we don't have 100 years, right? So really it's about testing and validating commercially viable ideas, but not fundamental research, right? Fundamental research is for the university, basically. Back.
Can you give a couple examples of how Skai has helped the companies you covered up there beyond pure funding?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the second part of your question.
How Skai has helped a couple of the example companies beyond the pure finances?
Sure. In a number of these instances, we're sort of the founder, if you will, of the business, right? So in the case of TrueTags, for example, right, it was a very smart scientist who had a great innovation, right? But there was no management team, there was no initial proof of concept, there was no development of the reader technology, there was no manufacturing, right? So we as Skai actually played a role as part of that founding team, if you will, right? We set up these different components so we can do proof of concept, demonstrate there's commercial value, and then ramp from there, right? So yeah, de facto, we are a founder in many of these businesses, if you will, much more than just a financial investor.
How do you normally find the technology for these businesses? So you say that you're in the business of really accelerating commercially viable technology, but what kind of strategies do you use to find where this technology is being developed so that you can bring it to market?
It's like anything else in life, right? It's serendipity plays a part in that, and it's also about sort of the the network. So for me, we have a lot of network through my alma mater, right? Hopkins, Stanford, Harvard, and the likes. We do a lot of work with different universities. We fund different types of research. We have 15 interns that comes through our shop every year, and every one of them bring like really unique, interesting ideas. But we're in the business of people more than anything else, right? It's about connecting with really smart people with a dream and a vision to do something different. But no one person can do that alone, right? It takes a lot of efforts, and it takes a lot of sort of an appetite for risk to make that happen. So we're in the business of people, really, and so I'm really glad to be here today, because I suspect one of you or many of you have such an idea or have such a sort of a dream in your minds, basically, and you are exactly the folks we want to be talking to, basically.
Very hands-on question. What do you interns do?
On the first day of their internship, we require everybody to learn how to do CPR and use an automatic defibrillator so they can save somebody's lives during the course of their internship. We sign them to different tasks depending on their level of interest, right? So there's enough sort of technical projects that they're very sort of science and technology oriented, and they can actually go into a lab and work on something. Some other folks are more interested in business, right? We would put somebody on a supply chain analysis, figure out the CapEx, the risk factors, and all of that stuff, of course. But we require every intern to make a presentation at the end of the internship on an idea that they would like to pursue, right? Kind of a full-blown business plan, right? Think through this. What would it take? Why is this worthwhile? How do you make it a big business? How do you plan to do it? And because we want everyone to have sort of some presentation skills, so they can go out there and pitch an idea when they're done with this internship. So it's fairly fairly flexible, actually.
Well, you seem to be a very busy man compared to all these different ventures you're involved in. How do you distribute your time?
I always swim in the ocean daily. You saw my office earlier. And I try to distribute my time, again, around people, but not events or projects, right? So every one of our companies has a leader, has a chief operating officer or CEO whose job in life is to live and die by that company, right? So they are it, right? The buck stops with them, basically. And my job is to find those kind of people, right? Who really have not only the expertise, but the passion to make that business successful. So again, I spend most of my time on people and ideas.
What would you say are areas of healthcare where there are unsolved problems and where innovation will be needed in the future?
I would say it will be virtually all aspects of healthcare that requires innovation. But I think the area of healthcare IT in particular is a very large area for a whole variety of reasons that you're aware of. And that's very much an area that we are particularly interested in diving in much deeper. In fact, there's an entrepreneur here I met earlier who's got a great idea. I won't say the name, but we met just about an hour ago.
What would you say has been your biggest failure, and how did you move forward on that?
There's so many. Instead of giving you sort of one, I think maybe I can sort of summarize for you, right? At the end of the day, there are a lot of factors that have to work in concert for one of these ventures to be, ultimately successful. And timing is one of them. Because you operate in an environment where there are lots of other smart people in the world with equally great ideas. You operate in an environment where there's lots of funding and resources in this world chasing after great ideas, right? So I guess the big challenge is you have to know sort of where you are relative to everything else. I tell people it's like sailing, right? You got to have a great ship, which is your technology. You got to have a great crew, and so they know how to sail. But you also got to have wind, basically. And you can't do it if one of the three variables are missing, basically. So we've made all kinds of mistakes, of course, right? Picking the wrong guy for the management, right? There are people who have perfect resume, but when they show up, right, when they have to make their own Xerox machine or get their own coffee in the morning, they're shell-shocked. They say, oh my gosh, I've never done this before. What am I going to do? You don't know that till they really show up, all right? You have technology that looks fantastic, and a week later, right, someone equally smart comes up with something that completely obviates, that particular technology. So these are all things that happen. And but as they say here, right in the valley, right, you want to fail early so you can go on, right? And nothing wrong with failure. The worst thing is never taking a chance in the first place.
What are the key aspects you look for in the people you surround yourself with?
Very simple. I want them to be smarter and better looking than I am. Because then I don't have anything to worry about, right? Then they can take care of as many tasks, as many difficulties as possible, right? Always, hire up, recruit up, basically.
One more. So the cloud and service providers like Amazon Web Services and Rackspace have made the fixed cost of starting an IT company essentially zero at the beginning. What's going to be the next big thing in the medical space that similarly lowers the barrier to entry?
There are many. I can talk to you afterwards, actually. But that's extremely valuable, right? So now it's an even playing ground, right? So what you need now is people with really smart ideas, right? That means someone who's a great inventor with a great concept and a critical insight can be as competitive as the next guy who's got a big infrastructure behind them, because you don't have to build that stuff from scratch, basically. So the playing field is really even. That's why being creative and smart, having great insight is going to make a huge difference. And that's why healthcare IT is going to be a hot area, I think. Thank you.
Yeah. How did you start Skai?
So it was actually that airplane ride. I was flying back and.
Like the initial capital had to come from somewhere. How did you? Okay, this is our first project, for first company that we're gonna start with. How did that all sort of start?
Like the old-fashioned way. Went home, sat down, took out my checkbook, and started the company, basically.